Hello, and welcome to the Karma Story Corner. I'm not going to keep doing that voice, it's creeping me out. Hello, this is SiFi from Bad Karma Cards, and I'm here to record, hopefully, some creative works of myself and the other members of Karma Kraken and Bad Karma Cards. If you want to check us out, Tiny's work is over on our Facebook page, and if you want to check out my stuff, it's over on Wattpad under the pen name Nathan Gallaglass, which you should be able to see now while watching this. This is going to be an exercise, a dry run, and hopefully we can take it from there. If people like what they hear or what they read, like, share, and subscribe. Leave us a comment. If you don't like it, please leave us a comment saying why you didn't like it. Hopefully it'll help us improve as writers or creators. And hopefully you'll keep up with us and we'll keep doing this if people like it enough. So to start off with, we'll be covering my first work, Broken Steel, The Pillars of Sovereign, which is one in a series of books which has been heavily inspired by manga and anime, mostly mecha anime, such as Gundam, Visions of Escaflowne, Appleseed, and the list goes on, really. And I could be here for a while just explaining that, really. The Pillars of Sovereign falls into 4 books, which makes up the first arc, again, inspired by anime and their arcs. And the series goes The Pillars of Sovereign, Death Incarnate, Princes of War, and Mechanical Angel. And this is sort of an attempt to bring it to a wider audience, to get more people interested in it, and hopefully inspire me to carry on working on it, because in my mind, Mechanical Angel is an amazing end to the series. I'm always hate how some things end, but I think Mechanical Angel hopefully nails an ending well. It's just that middle bit that I'm muddling through. Pillars of Sovereign is done and ready to be read, although what you read and what you hear on here might be a little bit different. Let's say you may read the first draft and this is the updated draft for narration or audiobook. And again, hopefully this will just get more people interested in it. It's just me here currently, hopefully I won't bore you too much. And the general layout of how things are going to go in the future is we will have a brief intro, catch up, tell you where we're up to, or recap what's happened. The main body, which will be either a chapter, or in this case today it will be the timeline of Broken Steel leading up to the first chapter, or episode as they're called actually in the books. And then afterwards there'll just be a bit of commentary, a bit of thoughts on the matter. And again, if you want to get involved, please just comment below, ask me questions. I'm always happy to answer, although sometimes you may just get an answer of Space Wizards because I might not have an answer. Other thing to really say before I start on with the brief timeline is that you'll notice all the dates fall into a very familiar format, as in Earth years. Although there are several calendars in Broken Steel, because it is a sci-fi story set in the far future in space. Different planets have different rotations, different yearly cycles, and so they will have their own calendars, but the general calendar of humanity goes by Earth, because it's the cradle world, the wonderful thing that gave birth to humans. They've messed it up. Earth is a complete wreck, but they still use it to try to make themselves feel a little bit better about their existence. So without further ado, I'm going to start on with the timeline, and then you'll have a brief understanding of what Broken Steel is and where it's up to leading into the first book, Pillars of Sovereign. Without further ado, with dwindling supplies and overpopulation choking the planet, the United Nations of Earth enact the Colonial Initiative. Over the next 30 years, humanity begin to colonize Earth's moon and Mars, as well as building several satellite colonies around Earth, Jupiter, and Venus. 2046. The first manned probes are sent beyond the reaches of Earth's system and into deep space. Although the destinations of each probe are light years away, and the trips are well beyond the average human lifespan, suspended animation is used to achieve these goals. Many of the manned probes are lost, never heard from again. 2051. The wasting, a pathogen, is released into Earth's atmosphere, which mutates into the most contagious virus ever known. 80% of the Earth's population is affected. Although the Earth is quarantined, the virus reaches several colonies off-world, devastating them. 2060. Following the devastation caused by the wasting, mass migration and consolidation begins. The devastated colonies are repopulated. 2062. As faster-than-light travel is still beyond the grasp of humanity, the first test of subspace technology begins. 2065. The colony ship Aurora sets out to establish the first colony beyond the Earth system. However, the journey will take upwards of 60 years. 2066. The first successful test of subspace technology allows a ship to travel between Earth and Venus almost instantly. Despite the side effects of the technology, it is rolled out, and human expansion explodes. 2068. The first colony outside of Earth's system is established on the planet that would become known as Aurora, in honour of the colony ship that would arrive 59 years later. 2072. As humanity expands, they discover a region now known as the Void, a stretch of space without a single system or nebula for several light years. Also, back upon Earth, the first designs of combat frames, walking tanks, are put into service. 2079. Contact is made with the first sentient alien race, the Baal. Initial contact ends badly, as the human exploration ship is lost. Humanity responds by sending an armada, along with the newly developed combat frames. The brutal war lasts only days, and as the Baal fall, humanity fans out to hunt their new enemies down. However, it was quickly discovered that the Baal were a small race, and humanity had instead raised the Baal homeworld. 2083. With stolen technology from the war with the Baal, humanity is able to produce the advanced battle frames and even larger space vessels. 2083. With stolen technology from the war with the Baal, humanity is able to produce the advanced battle frames and even larger space vessels. Studying and deciphering Baal texts, humanity learns of the ether, two pocket dimensions that exist on either side of our own. These dimensions make subspace travel possible, something that proved to be a fluke to develop without this knowledge. 2097 to 2164. Humanity continues its expansion into the southern and eastern reaches, while the United Government of Earth solidifies itself within the Earth system. Contact is made with two new alien species, the Sirens and the Bellicor, in 2120 and 2131 respectively. 2164 to 2201. The Consolidation Wars. Several skirmishes occur between systems vying for colonization and mining rights. Earth deploys the colonial peacekeepers to end the fighting and establish control over the disputed territories. Talk of separatism from Earth begins. 2198. Laser and phase technology is developed and perfected using technology recovered from the Baal. 2203. Work begins on 6 Leviathan-class ships, the largest ships ever built by humanity. 2207. Ruins are discovered across several worlds. As they are excavated, it becomes clear that the ruins are in fact Baal in origin. It is unclear how or why they now lay in ruins. 2230. By deciphering the symbol on Baal ruins, the world known as Eden is discovered. Its natural beauty is considered biblical. Facing growing pressure from religious movements, both new and old, the Earth government declares the planet a no-go zone and commissions a military station called Orion, to be built to police the system. 2235. The first subspace gate is built between Earth, Mars, and Aurora, allowing pinpoint subspace jumps over greater distances. Over the next 25 years, several more gates are built within Mars, acting as a hub. The furthest reaching being the Orion Station Gate. 2248. Growing unrest within the southern and western colonies lead to several emerging political and militant movements. Earth responds with martial law within key systems and the construction of 5 new garrison stations near to key worlds. 2250. As humanity remains under strict control and censorship, the push for expansion continues. Contact is made with the survivors of the Baal race. The now nomadic race move even further south to avoid contact. 2260. The Separation War. Planets to the west and east of Earth announce their intention to separate from Earth's rule. The next few years see diplomatic efforts break down as riots break out across the largest colonies. The chaos continues on for years. 2264. With the support of one of Earth's most prominent generals, the Separatists made the unexpected move of invading Earth. With the support of military loyal to the rebel general, Earth is overrun within hours. Most of the leaders of the United Government escape through the Mars Gate to Aurora. The next few years see the rebels send wave after wave of ships through the subspace gate to Aurora, hoping to break the holdouts once and for all. However, they continually smash against the Halo station and its massive armament now waiting on the other end, which had been constructed in secret by the Earth government. 2266. The rebel general that helped take Earth is granted sovereignty over Mars. He creates his own republic, which becomes collectively known as the Black Market. In time to come, Mars becomes a haven for mercenaries and traders. 2270. The exiled government of Earth returned through the Mars Gate with a fleet to rival that which confronted the Baal. The gate which the rebels assumed safe with the Black Market was now open, as they had been betrayed by the new Emperor of Mars. 2272. The retaking of Earth, however, took longer than its fall. The rebels, however outnumbered and caught by surprise, were dug in and fanatical. They held out for nearly 2 years before the Earth government began to hunt into the systems beyond. 2280. As the purging of rebels continue, humanity reaches a stretch of space in the southern frontier known as the Belt, a collection of dangerous nebulas and asteroid belts. As continuing on becomes more and more hazardous, humanity's expansion slows. With the turmoil at the core worlds, humanity switches its focus to fortifying its interior. 2282. With the last of the rebel worlds brought back under the Earth's control, those found unloyal are gathered up and shipped out to the frontier. Here they are put to work in hellish conditions. Some are even genetically altered in order to survive the hardships longer. Even harsher still, many of the labour are sterilised without their knowledge. Once Earth is secure, the return government renames itself the Federation of Earth. 2283 to 2300. Over the next 17 years, more and more are shipped out to the frontier. As more mines and production facilities are opened, the elite of Earth Federation are given rights and ownership on the frontier. The upper class live in luxury while the workers toil and die merely miles away. Also during this time, close to 30 prominent families and corporations were given special rights for their aid during the Separation War. They become known as the Merchant Princes. Each a small power in their own right, but together they are forced to rival the Federation. 2305. A disagreement divides the Federation Senate and the Merchant Princes. This divide widens and the Shogunite movement begins. 2308. 12 synaptic imprints are taken of the best and brightest minds of the time, all of which happen to be Merchant Princes. The hope is to create true artificial intelligence from these imprints. This becomes known as the Blades Project. 2310. The Crawley Foundation, a merchant prince organisation, unearths a bell structure on Aurora. Within the dig, they discover an artifact referred to as the Crystal. The first and only person to touch the crystal is Alistair Crawley, Sr. The dig teams are lost in a cave-in, and the crystal is moved off-world. 2312. Alistair Crawley withdraws from society. He isn't seen until nearly 12 years later with his son, Alistair Crawley Jr. 2320. Several political movements that were beginning to gain momentum in the southern and eastern frontier disappear overnight, as more prisoners and workers are shipped out to the mining worlds. 2328. Panama, an agricultural world in the Moscow system, blockades their own starports and refuses to supply any further food until the Federation opens negotiations with the outer frontier. The Federation takes this as a terrorist act and deploys troops who reopen the ports by force. 2330. The Blades Project grinds to a halt, as they are unable to create a stable AI. This is until the first true blade is created from an amalgamation of the 12 imprints. This AI is named Law. 2332. Growing unrest in the southern and eastern rim prompts the deployment of peacekeepers who garrison Gorgon Prime and York 8. The station Orion is also retrofitted. 2336. The Templar and Defender battle frames are put into active service. These advanced frames will be the first to bear the designation Cataphract. Around this time reports surface of the Chaplain Project. Cataphracts that have pilots hardwired into the cockpits. Once put into a Chaplain, a pilot couldn't be removed safely. 2338. Thomas Setra announces the Castellan Project, a fighting machine that he claims will be the first true cataphract. It will take 10 years before he has a working prototype. 2340. Unrest begins to flare up in the Outer Rim. Several riots erupt into street fighting, and weapons make their way into the rioters' hands from unknown sources. 2342. Once again, Panama seals its spaceport and fortifies itself against the retaliation from the Federation. However, the Federation uses this opportunity to field test the 12 now ready blades. The machines devastate the defenders and leave little standing. The field test is considered a success. 2344. In secret, the Shogunite movement begins to gain strength. Using the events on Panama, several planetary governments are swayed to pledge their support. 2348. Using the unrest in the frontier, the Shogunite begins to sow the seeds of rebellion. A task force known as the Black Dragons is formed in order to support the efforts. They move mercenaries and arms to the frontier colonies. 2350. With coordinated efforts across 16 worlds, millions of workers rise up in revolt. Some stage mass peaceful protests while others take the planet by force. In some cases, the workers outnumber the ruling class by 8 to 1, so any fighting is short-lived. This is until the Federation respond in force. 2351. The reinforced garrison stations of Gorgon and York 8 respond by deploying troops in force. The Federation forces are caught off guard by the well-equipped and tenacious workers, the genetic modifications making them more than a match for a trained soldier. The war that will become known as the Schism begins. 2352. The Black Dragons are responsible for the destruction of the Gorgon garrison, as well as the circulation of a new drug that once again allows the workers to reproduce. Suffice to say, the population on the frontier explodes. 2353. Setra begins to show the finished Castellan. At this time, word begins to circulate between the members of the Senate about rebel sympathizers within the Merchant Princes. Although they're not totally wrong, they're far too late. 2355. A Federation general by the name of Lungarum is charged with putting down the rebels in the frontier before it spirals out of control. Upon arriving and seeing the hell that they've had to live in, Lungrum begins to question his orders. By the end of the year, Lungrum has begun to supply and support several planets, going as far as declaring them under his protection. 2357. The Sacking of Genesis. The first event that will be recorded as the Seven Sins. The colony of Genesis is retaken by the Federation. Over the next few days, kill squads begin roaming the streets, killing all that they find, until the colony is left empty. 2358. The Fall of Titan. The mining complex of Titan is bombarded from space, killing 80,000 protesters on the surface. The Federation claims the rally as a terrorist summit, but the Black Dragons use the event to sow further discord. 2362. The Shogunate make their move. Several planets announce their allegiance to the new empire. 3 more surrender without a fight as fleets of ships arrive in orbit. The Federation scrambles to redeploy forces, but before they can, Shogunate fleets arrive at Aurora and Earth, the seat of the Federation's power. Along with their fleets and secret armies, the Shogunate reveal their trump card, the Blades at the head of their forces. 2363. Assumed to be a Shogunate sympathizer, Federation forces raid Cetra's home and personal facilities. In the chaos, Cetra and his family are killed, and the Castellan prototype is recovered. However, it is reported that a second hangar bay was found empty. 2364. The Scourging of Earth. Intense fighting continues on Earth and Aurora, with more forces arriving in droves. The Alliance becomes desperate and begins virus-bombing Shogunate forces. However, the Blades reap a terrible toll on Earth as they are unaffected, destroying the bomber in orbit and scourging the atmosphere. The next few years see the ecosystem of Earth collapse as the atmosphere becomes choked with toxic gases, rendering the Earth uninhabitable. 2366. The gathering might of Lungrum's fleet begins to organise the Workers' Rebellion into an effective fighting force. With their numbers bolstered, Lungrum sets about repelling the scattered Federation forces from the region. He takes a mining vessel known as the Crystal Rose, and after refitting it to be a moving fortress, he takes it as his flagship. He next turns his attention to the Orion Station and its gate to Earth. 2368. The Battle for Orion. Taking his reformed fleet, Lungrum heads towards the Orion Station, smashing through 3 Federation blockades along the way. The siege lasts several weeks, and both sides suffer massive losses. As it drags on, finally the Crystal Rose is breached, and Lungrum is fatally wounded by shrapnel. The dying orders of the general are to withdraw. However, the remaining highest-ranked officer, a Commander Bennett, proceeds to ram the crippled Crystal Rose into and through the Orion Station, scattering the remaining Federation forces. Lacking the manpower supplies to push on, the rebel fleet limps back into friendly space. As they rebuild and repair, the remaining soldiers and workers join and fully integrate. Although a difficult road lays ahead of them, the Alliance of Free Worlds is born. 2369. The Blade, known as Death, arrives on Aurora for the first time. Within days, it earns its name in the fear it sows. A Federation relief force arrives at Eden and the wreckage of Orion. Realizing the tenacity of the Alliance, they switch their forces to crushing the rebels on the frontiers south that have fallen beyond the Alliance's protection. 2370. Working in secret, Shogunate scientists reveal the Blades Mark II, a mass-produced and less advanced blade. Although to start with, they only number a few dozen, they were more than a match for anything currently in service. If it wasn't for the mass deployment of the Castellan Mark II by the Federation around the same time, the war would have surely ended. 2371. The Order of Retribution. Using the war as a catalyst, a holy movement becomes a rallying call for the frontier. Uniting the furthermost worlds, the religious order becomes a crusade practically overnight. And although founded by and supportive of peaceful ways, the order leads the rebels into a fight that catches the Federation and even the Shogunate off guard. The organised forces secure several key victories and give the two powers a bloody nose that they won't soon forget. 2372. The figure known as Set arrives in the frontier, killing 2 prominent officials and a commander, all linked to the merchant princes. The attack disrupts an operation to retake the York system, allowing the Alliance the opportunity to strike at York 8, the focal point of the system. Despite Black Dragon intervention, Set vanishes once again. 2374. Poisoning of York 8. After 3 years of bitter fighting between the Alliance, the Federation, and various local warlords on and off-world, the Alliance emerges victorious by repelling the last of the Federation forces entrenched there, and also by driving off advances by the Order and its crusade. The victory is short-lived, however, as the Federation forces begin virus bombing the planet before withdrawing. The atmosphere becomes choked with chemicals, and the seas turn red due to a reaction of the dying plankton. As the once vibrant world is reduced to a wasteland, the Alliance withdraw. 2375. Doubts begin to circulate about the Blades and the Mark IIs as entire platoons of the machine begin to vanish for months before reappearing. The memory banks altered. Several incidents are reported but never confirmed by Blades attacking remote bases, both within the Federation and beyond. 2377. The Black Dragons become publicly known and begin to operate openly on the battlefields both home and away. A power struggle begins to form within the Shogunate. Matters take a serious turn for the worse when Set appears once more and kills the Shogunate Emperor, the elected leader of the Empire. 2378. The Alliance puts into service 2 military units, the Corsair Corps and the Gorgons. Both will become notorious over the coming years. Also during this time, the Alliance begin developing their own cataphracts based upon the patchwork versions they are converted from mining rigs, the first of which is the Warhorse. 2379. The first colossal cataphract takes to the field, which is of Federation design. The Diablo touches down on Earth and Aurora. Shortly after, the other 2 powers rush to match the gigantic machine, the Shogunate developing the Khan and the Alliance the Dragon. 2380. Set appears on Earth and kills the current Federation president. His continued efforts reward him with the largest bounty ever recorded placed upon his head. To this day, it has never been collected. 2382. Death of Leviathan. The Leviathan ship designated Nostradamus is lost and becomes caught in a black hole. Although not caused by the war, any relief efforts are seriously hindered by the nearby fighting. Nearly 3 million people die in the incident. 2384. The blade known as Sense returns from an unauthorized mission, crippled. As it is repaired, the Shogunate begin to re-evaluate the use of blades and Blades Mark II. A full recall is issued of the 2nd generation, and work is halted on further development, the intention of which was to decommission them and start over. Before they could, though, the rebuilt Sense leads the Mark IIs in a rebellion. Although not escaping unscathed, the blades escape and disappear into the void of space. Around the same time, a ship of unknown design or origin drifts into Alliance space. On board, nearly 1,000 children are found in suspended animation. After test, it becomes clear that these children are artificial. The decision is made to keep them sleeping for now. 2385. The Federation makes one more push into the frontier in an attempt to reclaim its lost territories. After a bloody conflict with the Alliance, they shift attention once again to the rebel worlds and the Order. Despite breaking the Order's crusade and scattering the rebels, Shogunate movements force the Federation to redeploy, effectively saving the frontier. 2388. After wandering space for 4 years and avoiding contact with humanity the best they could, the Blades arrive in Alliance space and make contact. Sense had spent years building a new model to easily negotiate, a 3rd generation of Blade, an android. Now, the collective machines referred to themselves as NIM. With promises of aid in the war and infrastructure back home, it didn't take long before the NIM found a new home within the Alliance. 2390. After several scandals and crushing defeats due to misinformation from the Black Dragons, Emir Kato rises to the Shogunate throne and becomes Emperor. His first act is to publicly crush the Black Dragons and reorganize the Shogunate's fighting forces. For the first time in nearly 20 years of fighting, Cato takes 2 planets from the Federation. It is rumoured, though, that the Black Dragons engineered his rise to the throne and continue to work in secret. 2392. The Order of Retribution begins to lose the respect it once commanded, with the planets on the frontiers beginning to work for themselves and establish governments of their own. The Order finds itself wavering in power, and lacking anywhere to call their own. After a number of defeats, the Order withdraws and begins to focus on supporting relief efforts rather than hunting for fights. The frontier shortly after becomes the Banished States, a collection of planets independent from one another but uniting to fight aggressors that pose a threat. 2400. Destruction of Aurora. The years of bitter fighting had left its mark upon the world once known as the Second Earth. The millions that had fought and died over this icon of a world lay buried under rubble and twisted metal, yet nothing that had transpired here could compare to the act of a single machine. The blade known as Death was lost and thought destroyed. However, the machine stole itself away and began to work on a device so terrible that within hours of its activation, the planet known as Aurora was within its death throes. The planet tore itself apart, dooming all upon its surface, or dragged down those within orbit. The single most devastating and costly act of the entire war. In a single day, millions died, regardless of their age, their race, gender, or affiliation. None were spared, and the first colony of man beyond its home system fell silent. All across the human domain, guns fell silent. The war, for the most part, had ended. Between the condemnation and the outcry against machines, it was never truly decided if the end of the war was truly death's intent. 2401. Peace is signed between the Shogunate and Federation. Shortly after, the Alliance are also invited to sign the peace treaty. Although fighting continues along the border with the Banished States, and peace with them is never formally confirmed, the war is over. 2403. In order to maintain peace, the Star Council is formed with delegates from the Alliance, Federation, and Shogunate. 2405. The Order of Retribution claims York 8 as their homeworld. Tensions between the Alliance and the Order almost erupt into open hostility. 2406. The star in the zoo, roughly translated as sin, begins a new cycle. Radiation pours out from the sun as it begins to burn blue. The colony on Zoo Prime is lost, and the system is quarantined. 2407. Shogunate forces finally withdraw from their borders and focus upon rebuilding the still fledgling empire. The merchant princes who sided with the Shogunate are denounced, and the assets within Federation space seized. 2410. The Federation begins a restructure and emerges as the Federation of Human-Aligned Worlds. The political stance shifts towards human purity and xenophobia. 2411. Sirens and Be'lakor are officially recognised as members of the Shogunate, as well as offered seats upon the Star Council. This is also extended to the Baal, all of whom decline. 2418. The blade known as Fenris is lost during a singularity weapon test. Shortly after, the Star Council enforces a list of forbidden technology. 2420. Water is found upon the wasteland planet of York 8, allowing the Order to once again flourish. 2430. The blade known as Life, working to restore Earth, is lost under a pyroclastic flow. Although trapped, life continues on through several remote drones. 2436. The 1,000 children, now referred to as Alpha Children, are revived on Gorgon Prime, within the Alliance space. Although under constant monitoring, the children are allowed to live normal lives. 2438. The Leviathan known as Long Meadows is lost. When discovered a year later, the massive ship is abandoned. The blood and carnage paints a terrible scene. Although Baal is suspected, it is never proven. 2440. Several raids take place along the Alliance and Banished States border. Raiders are suspected. 2445. Trade between the Shogunate, Alliance, and Federation begins. 2446. The first Trinity tournament takes place on Mars. Luther of the Shogunate emerges as the victor but is assassinated days later. 2447. Work begins on the Titan project. 2450. Liam Wright, one of the merchant princes that joined the shogunate, is assassinated by a figure referring to himself as Seth. 2454. Alpha humans and Nim are allowed to enlist within the Alliance military, although no Nim actually does this officially. 2455. The Alliance colony of Port Royal is attacked and destroyed by raiders. Not a soul survives. 2456. The newly reorganised and rearmed Alliance fleets conduct systematic purges of pirates and smugglers within their systems. The Battle of Redmoor is a testament to the tenacity of the Alliance and the advancement of their technology. 2460. The Alliance and the Banished States sign a non-aggressive pact known as the United Frontier Accord. 2466. A raid upon an Alliance colony is observed by a passing cargo ship. The ships are identified as belonging to the Order of Retribution. Within hours of the colony's destruction, the Alliance mobilise. 2 whole fleets arrive above the planet York 8 and begin deploying troops. The first declaration of war in over 60 years. Boom, and now we're up to date. And that's fine. That is the brief timeline. And yes, I know you probably heard me said that and your eyes just roll a bit. But yeah, that is actually the brief version of it. There is a lot of stuff that isn't covered. Like, for example, what happened to Law after his activation. The deployments of the Blades during the Schism. And so much more that happens on, like, I don't want to give too much away, but obviously there's Set, then Seth. They're not the same person. I'm just going to put that there. They are related, but they're not the same person. And hopefully, when you listen to this, you haven't had to suffer through me failing to say words like joined too much. There's a lot that I've covered. Hopefully, it's trimmed down. It's easy to listen to, and you've enjoyed it. Like I said, if you want to leave any comments, and if you did enjoy it, please like, share, subscribe, ask me questions, leave feedback, good or bad. There's a lot of work that needs to be done on this, reading back through it. I wrote this a few years ago. Now, Death Incarnate I wrote very shortly after finishing this one, and I feel like Death Incarnate's the better book. But stay tuned. On the next episode, it will be episode 1, Breaking Dawn. Thanks for joining me here. This is SiFi, signing off.